Tonight, Kelly and I are going to show you guys some Big P emulator. Welcome. It was your face. I was fine, and then you made that face. I was keeping the
Sorry.
straight face, not suggesting anything.
No, no, not you.
No. Welcome back to Pog Panda. I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything. Joining me as always.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram. And if you get a chance, we'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Check out the channel there. Give us a few likes, some comments on our videos. Greatly appreciated. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, what you like. While you're perusing, you might want to jump over to our merchandise store. Links in the description. Many, many fine t-shirts for you to try there. And most importantly, your life is not complete unless you're a regular listener to the world's shortest podcast, Hard No. And it is available, I can't say exclusively. I don't know what to say. It's like really easy to get to on our YouTube channel. And it is the world's shortest podcast, Hard No. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. You're only going to check an episode out. It's less than a minute of your time. Why not? And I think you'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. Well, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Jaguar. We've been talking a lot about Atari stuff on this channel, which I don't think was something we intentionally did. It's just there's been a lot of cool stuff and a lot of stuff. You can put them in those two different categories. I think you have stuff like the fight stick and the 50th anniversary collection that are excellent. Then there's other stuff too, like $1,000 for cartridges and things. So there's stuff. There's a lot of Atari stuff happening. A lot of it is really good though, and I think one of the best things that's come out is the 50th anniversary collection, which we've talked a little bit about on here. I'm sure we're going to do deeper dives into some of the games in the future, but just really an excellent collection. Incredibly well put together, tons of great archival material going over Atari's history, different games, different eras of the company, and the different consoles themselves. What really made it stand out, though, is that it had a little selection of Jaguar games in there. And Jaguar, of course, for anybody who doesn't know, which would be weird if you're into retro gaming, but it was Atari's was just going to wipe the competition off of the field. Just finally take out Nintendo and Sega in one swoop, and the fledgling 3DO at the time, and come out with a 64-bit system that was just going to put them all to shame. Their problem, though, was that it wasn't just a 64-bit system. It was like a complicated mess of different chips, which had 64-bit, 32-bit, and 16-bit chips in there, and they weren't apparently great at teaching developers how to do this. So developers decided, well, there's a 16-bit chip in there, so we're just going to port 16-bit games to this. So it didn't make it appealing looking to fans, and it didn't really sell and kind of died a very quick death. But then a weird thing happened where the company that bought the Jaguar to use as dental equipment decided that they didn't want the video game portion of it, and they just made it free for everybody to use. So the homebrew and indie scene for Jaguar just exploded and is still going strong, literally decades later at this point now, where there is constantly new, like fully packaged cartridges that are coming out. The weird thing, though, is that there's just not a lot of emulator stuff for it, unlike every other retro system. It's one of those ones that's apparently very difficult to emulate. I'm not enough of a tech guy to explain why, but from everything I've seen, it's because of that weird, complicated architecture that the system had, makes it very difficult to emulate. Then this Atari 50th collection comes out, and the games play great on there. So, where's our Jaguar Mini? Where's our full Jaguar collection and things like that? So, doing some research to find out what they did, turns out they were using an emulator that was created by a fan, and it's the first emulator that's available that supposedly, I haven't tried every single game, but seems to be able to play every Jaguar game, which is a huge deal because I've tried emulating Jaguar games in the past, and they were rough. It was difficult to get through them, especially if you wanted the more intensive games like the infamous Jaguar port of Doom. I say infamous because that became the basis for every version of Doom from that point forward. But super popular games like Alien versus Predator and that kind of stuff. So I downloaded this, I sent it over to Kelly. It wasn't too difficult to get set up. And what's really cool about it, if you're not buying, like if you're like me and you just don't want to spend 45 hours setting up an emulator, so you'll buy, like a Super Console X or something like that. That's, a lot of the legwork is already done. Sure, there's duplicates and things like that, but other than taking some ROMs off and dragging some new ones in, a lot of the heavy lifting there is already done. I feel like this is even easier to use in some respects because you don't even need to unzip the files. Like
Wow.
you just drag a zip folder into the folder there and it just shows up on your list of games when you're in the emulator. It's great. So I downloaded a handful of games, totally legal ROMs, obviously. Including my favorite. I know people are going to get super mad, Kasumi Ninja. You can fight me. It's a good game. um it's one of these games that's just super hated by people. It's not great. It's a knockoff of Mortal Kombat. It's got some weird stuff in there, but I, as a huge fighting game fan, can appreciate that they were trying to do some different stuff in there. um and there's really terrible fighting games out there, so this would barely even crack a list of poorly made fighting games for me. But I downloaded that because that's a game that I genuinely enjoy. Of course, Doom. I never played the Jaguar version of Wolfenstein 3D, but similar to Doom, that became the console version that everything else was based off of. And it's because id Software actually made those ports of it. So the changes that they made to those games for the console just became the official console release that they would license out for other consoles. So the ports of Wolfenstein and the ports of Doom were actually not based on the PC version, but the Jaguar version, which included changes to the game. In Doom, it's mostly just kind of missing some stuff and some levels are shortened, but in Wolfenstein, everything is actually redrawn in there. And so the levels are kind of, I would say, like remixed versions of what you would get in there. But both really interesting games. So I was playing through those. Alien versus Predator, of course, is kind of the shining star of the Jaguar as a system. And honestly, it really is great. It really shows the Jaguar. It's not perfect, but it really shows what the Jaguar was capable of had they really put the time into it. Now, have you had a chance to check this emulator out or play any more Jaguar games?
So I played Jaguar games through the 50th anniversary stuff, but have not. You've sent me the information. We're going to want to kind of talk about that a little more. Uh, is that so? And folks, you need to go back and check out our video on how to get up and running on 3DO in about 10 minutes. So we'll include a link to that as well. But you spotted that, sent it to me, and that was a remarkably easy install. And a couple file downloads and you're up and running and away you go. So using that as my measuring stick of complexity, because I much prefer an easy path as well to get up and going. What would be the steps that I need to go through to now start to have my Jaguar emulation like you got me set up for 3DO?
I would say this is even a little bit easier.
Oh, great.
Because you're
I like
just
that.
taking, yeah. Once you have the emulator up and running, you're literally just dragging the zip files with your ROMs onto the emulator file, and they just show up in like a pre-made game list. So it's not even an issue of like taking disk images and anything like that. Like 3DO, I would actually say is more complicated. There's a few more steps to it.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is very, very straightforward. It's almost like a Super Console X once you get up and running. You just drag your files over and they're just there in a list of games.
So you said Big P earlier.
Yes.
Explain yourself.
That's the name of the emulator.
Okay. So we'll include a link to that so you know where to get it, folks. Kind of get set up and all the instructions on how to get it installed. But yeah, no, I have not. I'm super encouraged. You had sent me a couple notes as you were kind of getting up and going on it, and I got at least a hint initially. Like, I don't know, this sounds like this might actually be a little more complex, but it sounds like I misread
No,
that.
it's pretty straightforward. So I think where my initial thoughts on it being more complex were a lot of the videos that I was watching, people were going in and kind of like messing with settings to intentionally overclock it to make the games faster. You don't need to do that. In fact, I can tell you because I played Kasumi Ninja on an actual cartridge on an actual Jaguar many times, it plays smoother on this at just the regular standard settings than it did
Hmm.
off of the actual cartridge. So for me personally, I have no interest in going in and overclocking anything because it doesn't need to play fit. Like that's not an accurate representation of the game at that point, in my opinion. But that's a lot of the stuff that people were doing. And I think I was kind of getting lost on that and not realizing I could just drag games over and just play them the way they were meant to be played without having to go in and mess with anything.
Yep. That sounds yeah, I'll be with you on there, and I'll say it's due to wanting to be genuine, but I'm lazy. So
Yeah.
that sounds good. I like drag it and play it because that's a much better way to go. So
Yeah, I'm basing off Kasumi Ninja because that was the cartridge that I bought many years after Jaguar disappeared. Came across a used one, and it was a new copy of Kasumi Ninja, like new, sealed in the box, but a used Jaguar. And I was able to get the bundle of them for a reasonable price. So that's the only Jaguar physical game that I had. But played that quite a bit, and I can tell you it runs a little bit smoother emulating it than the actual real cartridge does. So for me personally, going in and trying to make the games faster doesn't even make sense. Um, there is also, of course, terrible games for Jaguar. Lots of games that just look 16-bit or maybe 16-bit with a little extra color. You're going to see, just like with the 3DO emulator, not only are you going to get the great stuff about Jaguar, like Doom and Alien versus Predator and Tempest 2000 and all that good stuff, you're also going to see why it failed. Because you're going to see essentially 16-bit games with a few extra colors in there is a lot of what ended up coming out on there. So similar thing with 3DO. 3DO had great games on there, but 3DO's great games were just ports of existing games you probably owned that were way better. So, for example, the Wolfenstein 3D port for 3DO has the entire Jaguar game and the entire PC game and an original soundtrack for it. Easily the best version of Wolfenstein 3D, but it's like the 50th version of Wolfenstein 3D that was released. So just like that had its issue of not having like original games that would push you out to buy the system. This one was, why would you pay the extra money for a new system when the games look just like their 16-bit counterparts? Maybe an extra color or two, but other than the standout titles, a lot of them look 16-bit. So you're going to see what makes Jaguar great and also why it failed, which to me is interesting.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'll have to get on it because it's tough though because you get the 3DO emulation now, and so that's an interesting world to explore and be in for a while. But definitely need to kind of get this up and running. So we're gonna include a bunch of links for you folks so you can kind of go out and grab that emulator, get yourself set up.
I also
And
highly recommend. I grabbed a hard drive off of Amazon. I
mhm,
put the 3DO and Jaguar emulators on here, along with a bunch of ROMs, legal ROMs for both of them, and I can play them right off of the hard drive.
there you go.
Just
Just
plug the hard drive in, open up the emulator, and I'm playing everything right off the hard drive. So it's not even slowing my computer down having all that on there.
excellent, cool. Yeah, I'll have to investigate. I like that approach. I think I'll have to do that. Cool. All right. Any other Jaguar insights for us before we wrap it up?
Not so far. I would definitely, especially with 3DO and Jaguar, because I think they are divisive systems that have great stuff and terrible stuff on there. I would love to do some deep dives of games and really just do like individual reviews in the future of some games off each one.
Sounds good. Yep, most definitely. Cool. Well, thanks for watching, folks. Let us know if what you're emulating right now, if you have a favorite kind of thing, and if you were to
Send those
recommend some,
emulator pics.
what's that?
Send those emulator pics.
Send us those emulator pics. And if you're sending us the Big P emulator pick, make sure it's really the emulator. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.